So it was very my pleasure to have your session over here, and it was very interesting and knowledgeable. Only one thing I was wondering, that I feel that I am blessed as a student to read Gita. Arjuna was not blessed because he learned lessons from Gita too late in his life. So even if we will not teach students those life lessons and management lessons from Gita at the student time, they'll be facing same problem as Arjuna faced in later of his life. So this is what I'm thinking, that yes, of course, there are other things, Panchatantra and Jatika tales, and they should also be taught. But I think that management lessons from Gita should also be taught. Maybe the pedagogy can be different, as Professor Mahadevan mentioned in the morning, that RGB theory, which also reflects as SRT, or even Professor Subhash Sharma has given OSHA model, which also beautifully teaches us to learn more and more SRT things of Gita. So I think that this should be there in the student curriculum part. So, sir, can you please justify that why it should not, or
no, why it should not, I already justified. But I'll say is that rest assured, because Sandeep Singh has said here that Gita shouldn't be taught, it doesn't mean we will stop. People will stop teaching and Professor Madhav will stop teaching. I was just giving alternative views, so rest assured on that you will be taught Gita. Thank you.
One particular point in general matter, when a question is asked or when a small error is pointed out, it is not meant to pick holes in the speaker. It is meant for furtherance of knowledge. And if somebody were to say, that is not the way, I would humbly like to submit that it is the way. If no questions were asked, no Upanishad would have come into being. My question is not a question, but a small note addressed to Mr. Rai. Well, we are talking about the Indian wisdom suitable for management. Indian wisdom does not mean texts like Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita and Arthashastra alone. We must also include the Buddhist wisdom as well as the Jaina wisdom. In the context of what Mr. Rai was pointing out, the context, well, it is pointed out by, well explained by the theory of judgment of the Jaina philosophy. What is the theory of judgment? Well, it is I would not like to go into it, but it will take some time. And regarding the recitation of slokas, you said, sir, you were for narrating the stories of Panchatantra, but probably you did not support the reciting of the slokas. As you say, correct, once you recite the slokas at the beginning itself, well, the students will not be impressed. But after the narration of the story of Panchatantra, if you recite an appropriate sloka, I think it will be well taken. And even if you don't have the background of Sanskrit, if you have not studied Sanskrit in school, does not matter. Well, you can pick up Sanskrit at any age. So this is my, and good things have to be taken to the people. Even if 5% of the people are benefited, it contributes good to the society at large. Thank you.
Was there a question or was it a statement?
Comment.
We don't need to respond.
No.
What I feel was the question which I raised in the previous session also, that how do we take at research and classroom teaching. What I feel is, I agree with Mr. Sandeep to a great extent, where we say to capture the ethos. And it also says, Vyavhara Adhyatma Muchyate, bring the spirituality in your behavior. What we see with the open eyes is the truth, it's the reality, and how we make that work. So to a great extent, I agree with you, and to Dr. Rai, construct development is also the requirement. And when we marry the two, the ethos with construct development, then I think that we'll make it more, scientific in approach, where we are able to hold back our own emotional attachment, and it becomes just a academic resource. And then if we really want to develop a Bharatiya management, then I think both of you shared brilliant ideas that how can we capture the thoughts and how can we develop the constructs. So my humble request is now show us the path.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, of course.
3 points. One, I would talk about if I look at constructs don't emerge from thin air. Constructs emerge from observational experience. So, what is your pedagogy? It emerges from pedagogy. What is your belief about learning? And I will say that we need to move away from the teaching paradigm. They've almost destroyed the creativity of our generation by just teaching them. We need to allow them to learn. And and in our system, there is a rich understanding of learning. Right? So please, let's just not teach, let's not keep saying teaching. You're not teaching to cows, you're teaching to human beings. Allow them to learn. So pedagogy will depend upon how we develop constructs. How does pedagogy develop? Practice. We have become intellectual sailors. Can I make a request to all of you? Practice a little bit. Practice what you preach. So if you talk about of ideas of our cultural ethos and the intellect, practice it. Do some meditation. Go there in silence and you realize how powerful it is. Practice will let you get inspired into how you do pedagogy. Pedagogy will help you develop the constructs. Have I answered your question?
Yeah.
I'd like to add a bit of mine. One question comes: is it fine if you're teaching it? As I said, what I'm going to teach is the Indian model of strategy. I'll just give one example. After liberalization in 1991, if you remember, all the big corporates had their lobbies lobbying against liberalization. During liberalization, we had a Coke and Pepsi entering India. So there was nobody to oppose them actually, but who were the biggest people who were threatened because of Pepsi or Coke? Is the Dab sellers, the Nariyal Pani, and the Nimbu Pani sellers, isn't it? They didn't have any association, they didn't have nothing to lobby. What did they do? Any thoughts? They kept a thermocol box, put some ice cubes, and started selling Pepsi Coke along with Nimbu Pani or Nariyal Pani. How could they do it? Because they had a clarity that they are not in the business of increasing market share of Nariyal Pani or Nimbu Pani. They were in the business of quenching thirst. So once you can define your business clearly, you'll do well. Now people have stopped consuming Pepsi or Coke. Those guys have stopped keeping thermocol box. You can go and check this. Live. This is not one example. I'll give another example. Look at Cadbury's. Came to India. It wanted to replace laddu, more or less. Rakhi ke samay hata do. They went to Pappu pass ho gaya. That's the time when you ask generally laddu. So laddu was the main target. Then they moved step by step. When they wanted to talk to the rural people, they talked about Miss India and they showed a cow because in the village they wouldn't have accepted a girl being, Miss Palanpur kind of thing. So those companies understand Indian psyche much better. Then they came to wanted to make people use it as a commodity. Like, so महीने की पहली तारीख है, like you buy it with a ration, you buy even atta, chawal, dal, and you buy Cadbury's also. But what happened in the end? They started advertising the product they were competing with. मन में 2 लड्डू फूटा. Spent crores, on demonizing laddu or trying to get rid of it, and they came out with the campaign, मन में 2 लड्डू फूटा. So laddu was being advertised by Cadbury's, the main competition. And look at what the sellers did. Now, we have many kinds of laddu in this country. मोतीचूर के लड्डू, नारियल के लड्डू, तिल के लड्डू, बूंदी के लड्डू, बेसन के लड्डू, सूजी के लड्डू, पानी आ रहा है. Organizers. ain't for you. So what did the shopkeepers do? They created a laddu of chocolate also. We had a chocolate modak. Ek aur thali बढ़ा दी. This guy was fighting to replace, and this guy was reduced from a brand to a commodity. That is the strategy. How you deal with the common businessman understands. We don't look at him to build Indian business model. That is where Indian business model is. He is in the business of not increasing or decreasing market share of maida, suji, til, nariyal ka laddu. He's in the business of selling laddu. He's in the business of selling sweets. He understands business far better than most of us. And you know what? Cadbury has realized it, and you can go and check. I've got the quote. I've got from Hindu Business Time, because you may not believe me otherwise. That this year, Cadbury's went talking to shopkeepers कि जैसे मैदा खरीद तो दिवाली में सूजी खरीद तो 2-4 टन चॉकलेट खरीदो हमसे. That is their next business model. And in one of the interviews, you know what Ratan Tata has been found saying? If you want somebody, I can share the exact quote. He said we need to think what business we are in, especially like a company like Tata Steel. Are we a materials company or a steel company? Are we interested in increasing the market share of steel? Because today you find the vehicles need the steel, but tomorrow it might be fiber because of weight and petrol consumption and mileage. So should we think ourselves as a material company and start moving into fiber? And in fact, they have invested huge amount of money. Can we make cars out of fiber, buses and trucks out of fiber? Because we are not in the business of increasing market share of steel. Ratan Tata realized that, and our common businessman who has not been an MBA knows that. And I can give you till tomorrow evening, I can sit and keep giving you examples like this. I'm plucking my book with the permission. I have my book, the self-published Indian Ocean Strategy, because we have impacted business all across Indian Ocean, as I gave you an example. I've got some copies if somebody is interested. You can take it for more examples, different kind of strategies. So we have a very established systematic business model. At least I have put it in my book. I can talk to you how we have built brands, amazing brands, Indian brands, and there is a very defined model which our common businessman knows. Once you go back to studying them, we'll be able to evolve, which will be interesting to kids. Thank you.
More than a question, impression. Sandeep sir, you really made sense for me. It was very interesting. For a reason, I feel that there's a hurry in jumping to look at the product of Indian management than the process. You throw insight on look at process, what's happening, about how you did before and how are you doing today to make it something better. It was very interesting to see that we are performative tradition. Look at West, the action is followed by knowledge. We do Kriya Gnana. First we act, then we look at knowledge. So stories play a big model to make something, learning out of it. Stories as an exemplar, mimetic learning. You also brought games there, fantastic. I really liked it. This is your presentation. Yes, a question here now. Can you make the case study as a story there? Because when Sudhanshu sir was talking about, we're giving a story about this Punjab experience there across. It was more interesting. At this age, we sit and listen to stories. The Indians are very good at listening stories. Yes, can you make this case studies as a story? It's already there, right? Indian case studies. So how do you make this a story building and a case building?
There is be mindful that case study research is different from case study teaching. They're two different things. And be very mindful of that. Because those of us who write case study for teaching find it very difficult to write case study for research. And it is that problem that we get rejected in good journal papers. We can write very good case studies. Now, what is the difference? Why should our academics be mindful of that? Because I'm sitting on the other side of the table, I'm evaluating them, right? So, what would be the things that I'm looking for, right? So, a case study for research, I have to look at the constructs. That means I have to look at validity, I have to look at rigor, I have to look at constructs, I have to look at internal validity, all of that. Right? But for stories as a teaching case, I don't need all the constructs. So if you write a research story, a case study for research, you can make a very good teaching case. Most of the very, very good research cases are also teaching cases. So my suggestion, if we go further with the Indian, our trying to push our agenda onto the international stage, I would recommend let's get one thing right. Let's write very good research case studies based on our NIA system, right? And be brave and be bold, not timid. I believe in being bold, right? Okay, you'll get rejected once, never mind. Rejected twice, never mind. But be bold. And then convert it to nice stories because you've already done the hard work. It's very easy to do that. That would be my line of suggestion. Does that make sense to you?
Thank you, Sandeep ji. You mentioned about context. Sorry, Mr. Ra, Dr. Ra, you mentioned about context and also context embeddedness. Now, this practice of context embeddedness is not isolated from the reality of context imprisonment. So therefore, how do we be with context? Embedded but not imprisoned. So I would like to therefore pose the challenge of context transcendence and embeddedness together. The context itself also has his time and space, and both time and space of context has multi-layers. So how do we develop this multi-layerity of space and time along with context? About Nyaya, can you kindly elaborate what would be the Nyaya methodological practice in terms of understanding a case? So finally about experience also, so how the practice of experience relates, for example, to emotion.
Okay, 3 questions. Let me take the easy one. The NIA system, right? Let me give you an example how I think we should be bold. So in the NIA system, there is one logical tradition called how we inference. Now, there are 2 ways to infer. The inference in the again, I've asked not to, but I will ask you for your forgiveness if I say the Western system. So, inference in one system is about sampling. So, that there are, say, 1 million observations, and you take a sample of that and you run it through some kind of internally valid hypothesis, and then you come with a number, and then you say, okay, I infer that the result here would speak for a larger group, right? But in our system, that is not valid knowledge. In our system, if you choose an inference, you have to demonstrate that inference to be true in real observation in real life. For instance, if you say that there is smoke, you see smoke on the hill and you infer that there is fire, that is not good enough. You have to also show that relationship in real life. So how will it work in writing a methodology paper? How will construct validity work? So construct validity will work that you say, I'm just saying this from my reflection right now. Okay? So perhaps the construct validity would work that you would say, you would not quote the results, you would not infer first, and you will not show empirical evidence second. You will show series of empirical evidence that this is A is related to B is related to C, and several instances of empirical relationships, and then you can infer later on. So that to do that, you will capture the context and the experience right in the way you narrate the story. And that is consistent with our system, because then you are showing empirical evidence, because ours is an empirical system, you show empirical evidence for the eventual conclusion. Am I making sense to you? Am I answering your question? Okay, then the third question, I don't have a clue. I don't have the answer to that because I don't know how I can make experience multi-layered. That I've not spent time on that and have not spent energy on that. So that's the third question. The answer to that is I don't know. Maybe there are other brilliant scholars who have done work in this area can answer that question. And what was your first question again?
Context, embeddedness and context integration.
Oh, I think that is rhetoric.
Not rhetoric.
I think that's language in management schools. I mean, I'm an innovation researcher. Imprisonment for me means habits, right? So I mean, we can talk till the cows come home about what is which is what, but I think in real data collection and analysis, I think we cannot afford this luxury of splitting hairs about what is context embeddedness and context imprisonment. That is, the philosophers can do that. And they do that all the time, and I'm very grateful for that thought. But for us, we have to show empirical correlations. I'm sorry I've not answered your question, but this is my knowledge, the extent of my knowledge.